Good afternoon, Bayou Blitz family, and welcome to the Bayou Blitz post-game show. And I use the word game in loose quotation marks. I am Bob Rose. I am one of your angry co-hosts this afternoon. I want to welcome you in. Joining me and I'd like to welcome Brendan Boylan, my co-host. Brendan, happy effing Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll definitely give Angry Bob his floor because that's why we're gonna have so many viewers today. It's not because of the Saints performance, but because what they get from Bob Rose later. But this team, you almost want to sound like a 16-year-old girl and just say like I'm so done. But this offense is just that's where we are
Mhm.
is you have an offense that you look at the yards numbers, like you look at the numbers and you go, you know what? Not awful. Carr threw for 300 yards. Like they ran for 150, somewhere in that range. Like you look at those statistics and you go, you know what? That's probably a pretty good outing as a team, but you fail to find the end zone. You settle for 6 field goal tries and man, poor like Blake Groupie for your fantasy team, Bob. At least there's some positive there. We
Yeah.
joked about that in the pregame, but I mean, good lord, you can't trot a guy out 6 times to keep you out in a game. And then you look defensively and you go, okay, well, Desmond Ritter, like 168 yards, 2 picks. He had the one touchdown pass to Bijan. Not bad. You got tore apart on the ground for over 5.5 a carry. Falcons finished with 228. But you kept Ritter in check for most of the game. He only had 30 rushing yards, which, say what you will, but this is a Saints team that gave up what, like 70 to Trevor Lawrence. So at the end of the day, you could put that feather in your cap as a victory. The Saints defense held Atlanta to 17 points, right?
Yep.
Because one was the pick six. But
Yeah.
that's where the problems are, Bob, is this team gets into the red zone and they have no idea how to score. Uh, and Derek Carr is one of those guys where the expectation, we've talked about this all year, the expectation level for Derek Carr may be too high because of the contract, right? Like a lot of people associate money and performance, and he's getting paid a lot of money. And the criticism he gets is rightfully earned. But this is a guy who you look at the numbers again, 304. Only got sacked one time. He had the bad pick. But you look at the numbers and you're like, that's not terrible. And then you go back and you watch the tape and you have throws where you're like, what the hell are you doing? Like you're not talking about a young guy. I think I'd have a completely different view if the Saints had like a Desmond Ritter type of guy playing quarterback right now. You know what? Okay, it happens. Like those 2 Ritter interceptions, one of them, the first one in particular, I don't know if that was on Ritter because you had 2 guys in the same area. The second one, can't throw a back shoulder when you have that type of defensive coverage. Okay, I'm cool with that if you have a second year quarterback. Some of the throws Derek Carr makes, I'm like, how? You've been in the league for a decade. How? The Olave one. And I mean, some of you are going to be upset that Olave's hurt. You can't put it all on Derek Carr. But how is that an underthrown ball? How do you not lead him back into the middle of the field? How do you, if it's not the middle of the field, how do you not let him run under it? There's no one there. That's a touchdown.
He'd still be running.
Right, exactly. Like Olave would have scored a touchdown. He probably would have been somewhere close to 200 yards receiving if he catches that pass and runs it in for a touchdown. My fantasy team would have greatly appreciated it, Derek. But I don't know at this point. And the ongoing thing with you and me, Bob, and you guys watching, hey D, hey Elizabeth, Courtney, all of you that are here week in and week out, you know what we say. Like it's the ongoing joke of on paper, this should be a better Saints team. And the broadcast said it a lot today. On paper, the talent that the Saints have, this and that. At this point, I don't know how to evaluate this team and say, how do we get better? Because it's one of those things where it is well, we know what the problems are and we just have to be better. And you're like, okay, well, DA, do you even know what the problems are at this point? Because you keep saying you're aware of what the problems are and we're going to get better. at this point, I don't even know if the front office or the coaching staff or whatever really knows what the problems are, because we're seeing the same thing week in and week out. If you want to be positive, and I'm typically a positive guy, you can sit there and say, well, the offense moved the ball. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, wonderful. Like I said, 148 rushing yards, 300 yards passing, 450 yards total offense. Perfect. But how many games, and this is a question that I may torture myself with. How many times in NFL history has a team gained 450 yards offense and not found the end zone? Like, that's going to be one that I'm like, I mean, I'm not going to say it's zero, right? But it's got to only be a handful. So with that, Bob, I don't know what the answers are. The defense got absolutely gashed in the run. There is absolutely no pressure on any quarterback. Another week of no sacks. Didn't see a lot of JPP. He had a slight cameo appearance maybe. But at the same time, like, and I know at this point in Jason Pierre-Paul's career, he's not going to be like the difference maker.
No.
Right? He might have a little bit of pressure here, a little bit of pressure there. Not a signing to get super like excited about. But my Lord, like, they can't pressure the quarterback. They're getting gashed in the run. The offense is allergic to the end zone. You're sitting at 5-6, and somehow, some way, by the grace of the football gods, you are still in the NFC South race. How can this team? I don't even think it's how can this team get any better at this point? Because I think the realistic question is, like, can this team actually get any worse? Because you and I have been begging for consistency for weeks, and that's the biggest thing. You're either going to be a consistently bad team, a consistently mediocre team, or a consistently good team. And we've had like a roller coaster with that. We've had moments where we thought, well, the Saints have had a good game. They had a terrible game. And all realistically, they've been consistently mediocre. And you're like, I kind of want it one way or the other. Get off the fence, New Orleans. Are you a bad football team or are you a good football team? Because this outing shows you're a bad football team. But, they could come out against Detroit, the number one team in the NFC, and just beat the heck out of them at this point. Who knows? I mean, this is a team that I don't think there's any clear direction on who they want to be.
I think there is a clear direction for this team, and it's bad. This is a bad football team. When you lose to, I'm sorry, a putrid Atlanta Falcons team, almost lose to an awful Chicago Bears team, you do lose to an awful Green Bay Packers team. You're a bad football team. When you're 1-11 against teams with 500 or better records, now the Falcons didn't fall into that category today, but when you're 1-11 against teams with a 500 or better record, you're a bad football team. When you were below 500 at home for the last 2 seasons under your coaching regime, you're a bad football team. So yeah, I do think that there's a direction for this team, and it's pointed decidedly downward. This team, there were some positives to take out of today, to be perfectly honest with you. But again, good football teams don't lose a game to a bad football team in a situation like this. This was a critical game for New Orleans. Now, a loss by no means puts, they're not even close to mathematically out of it. And by the way, if you folks tuning in have missed it, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in true NFC South fashion, lost to the Indianapolis Colts. So when we come back here tomorrow, or as we sit here now, I should say, the Falcons. The Falcons are in first place in the NFC South with a 5-6 record, by virtue of a head-to-head tiebreaker over New Orleans, who sit with the identical first place 5-6 record. But let's ignore possibilities for a minute. Yeah, we'll acknowledge them, like you said, Brendan. This team could go on even a mini run. I think even 500 football down the stretch might get you into the playoffs as a divisional winner. But take a look at the product on the field, week in and week out. The only thing consistent about it is the fact that it's infuriating in its nature. You get down into the red zone 5 times today. You put 2 field goals up. You turn the ball over twice. And coaching decisions. We could talk about play calling all we want. That's probably a show for another day, an entirety of a show for another day. But you finally decide to make a scapegoat out of somebody. Taysom Hill. When Taysom Hill lost that critical fumble inside the Falcons 10, I don't remember seeing him for another offensive snap the rest of the day. Dennis Allen, that's who you're going to make a scapegoat out of? A guy that's playing his ass off? Meanwhile, you have a run defense, and again, I use that word loosely. A run defense that gave up close to 200 yards today, and you were getting absolutely embarrassed on the edge. And that's where the Saints have gotten gashed in the last 4 or 5 weeks, is on the edge. Bijan Robinson looked like it looked like a Hall of Famer. Now I love Robinson as a back. I know you do too, but to give up rushing yards at the pace that they were giving them up, inexcusable. To not even sniff Desmond Ridder. And Atlanta's offensive line is built for run blocking, not pass protection. Atlanta still has a lot of issues in pass protection. You couldn't even sniff the man. There were multiple times today where he had 5 seconds back in that pass pocket. Thank God Ridder didn't take off more than he did, because the middle of the field was wide open for runs every single time. And when he did, I think he had two runs, maybe more, for over 13 yards. So leave it to the Saints to saint this one up. Mobile quarterbacks will get gains on you. That's just the nature of today's football. Against everybody else, though, it's 5, 6, 8 yards. Against the Saints, it's 15, 20 yards a clip. I mean, this is downright embarrassing open field performance by this defense. And like I said, getting blown off the ball, shades of last year. There were a couple defensive players I could point to that had, I thought, nice afternoons. A couple offensive players that I felt had nice afternoons. And oh, by the way, now you're a New Orleans team that's once again the walking wounded. You have just getting hurt in today's game alone. Rashid Shaheed didn't come back, leg injury, probably not going to play next week. Chris Olave, concussion, didn't come back, unlikely to play next week. Ryan Ramczyk, Eric McCoy, they both came back, but they both left the game, for fairly significant stretches. Juwan Johnson left later in the game, not sure his status. Cam Jordan limped into the injury tent on either the last drive of the Falcons or the next to last drive. No word on him yet. So you're not even healthy now. And you're going up against an impressive Detroit Lions team. You can't even beat the bad teams on your schedule, Brendan. And yet, as journalists, for the next week or so at least, we're still forced to talk about the possibility of playoffs, because sadly, it still exists. This team, in spite of themselves, still has life. It's like shooting yourself in the face with a shotgun, and you still get to put on a tuxedo and go to the prom. That's what this team is.
The thing with this team too is, and you can't count anybody as easy wins anymore, right? When you look at a schedule. But after Detroit, you look at it and you go, very favorable. Like, and I know most of the season has been, but it's like after Detroit, it's like Carolina, New York. I might have flip-flopped that. And then the NFC South and the Rams are somewhere in there. And you go, you know what? All of those are winnable football games, even with how bad New Orleans has been this year. So here, Bob, you want to talk about us as journalists having to talk about what ifs? What if the Saints go lose to Detroit and then win out? I know that's probably not going to happen. But again, you look at the schedule and you go, you know what? it's very favorable for New Orleans to end up being the best of the worst in the NFC South. And I know what I said earlier, and I still stand by it. If you have a chance to make the playoffs, you get in and you just see what happens.
Oh
But I
yeah.
can almost say with utmost confidence that if this team makes the playoffs, whoever they host is going to beat the crap out of them in the Superdome. Whether it's Dallas, whether it's, I don't know, whoever it's going to be, because this team, we're both right. They're a bad football team. They're okay being mediocre, but like week in and week out, it's like they put a different mask on throughout the week. Like one week they're going to put, a superhero mask on because and they're going to play better than what we expect. And then the next week they're going to put, the makeup on and be the Joker because they fooled all of us into thinking that they're going to be a decent football team back-to-back weeks. And this is where we're at. It's frustrating. I read some of the stats out to you guys. I think again some of the positives like Olave stepped up really big, but
Yeah.
concussion protocol is really weird. Everybody reacts different to it. But Olave had like 7 catches for 112 before he left the game. It was really nice to see him step up.
Mm-hmm.
Disappointing not to see A.T. Perry get more targets in the game. Especially since he's going to be your quote unquote number 3 receiver. It was nice to see Derek Carr like outside of stepping up in the pocket, trying to scramble and holding the ball out to your side like old Michael Vick back in the day. I mean, look, he read the pocket well. He had good pocket presence. The offensive line held up pretty well. And I guess we'll close on this because I don't want to sit here and have you guys all depressed for the rest of the day either. But when it comes to the red zone, Bob, is that more play calling or is that more on Derek Carr? Because this is a team that has struggled mightily in the red zone this year. I also want to throw out for all of you people who are going, Derek Carr is the problem. If you guys want just a little bit more like, sauce to throw in your mix of Derek Carr hatred right now, the last 3 Saints touchdowns have came from quarterbacks not named Derek Carr. 2 from Jameis and 1 from Taysom Hill. Those are your last 3 Saints.
Wow.
So where are the red zone problems? Who do you blame?
It's equal parts for me because I've been highly critical of the play calling, especially in those situations this year. Highly critical of the personnel packages used. Alvin Kamara. You get inside the red zone on 2 different occasions today, and Alvin Kamara was taken off of the field. Why? How? But I put at least as much blame on Derek Carr. That man, and we knew this when he came over from the Raiders. That man has always been awful in the red zone. We made excuses for Derek Carr when he came over here, and said, "Oh, you look at the personnel and first Oakland, then Vegas, and it was just awful." And while yes, that's true, clearly more of the blame belonged to Derek Carr than what was given to him. And I don't, as you said before, with some of the throws that he makes or some of the decisions that he makes during the course of a game, it's like someone blindfolded him through his helmet without any of us seeing. And it gets even worse in the red zone. And which I suppose makes sense because when you can't read a field, or an opposing defense, when you get inside the red zone, everything gets kind of smashed up. You have a much less margin for error, and therefore good plays and bad plays are both magnified. And Derek Carr just doesn't see the field like an NFL quarterback. People accuse Jameis Winston of that. I get it. I get that criticism of Jameis. Derek Carr deserves it at least as much. And I think between the 20s, Derek Carr has been playing relatively well. Recently, I thought he played solid football today. But you don't win football games between the 20s. You have to convert on your opportunities. And the New Orleans Saints, they didn't today, and they haven't all season. Again, this is the mark of a bad football team.
And I'll close it out because you got some of the response from Bob there. But Bob, you seemed very surprised with what I threw out there. The last 3 Saints touchdowns came from quarterbacks not named Derek Carr. If
I
you want to call
was.
Taysom Hill a quarterback.
Well, I don't. I don't, and I won't. But but I get it. He was lined up at the quarterback position. To be fair, your statistic is a little off because Derek Carr was responsible for a 92-yard interception return for a touchdown
Oh,
today.
you're right. You're right.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Right. But yeah. I mean, that's surprising. That statistic is shocking, but it's also telling. Telling of Derek Carr, and frankly, telling of the play calling too. Because to go back to your question, when Michael Thomas was healthy, why didn't you use him more near the goal line? You have a 6'7" former NCAA basketball player as a tight end who has been toiling on your inactive list. You had Juwan Johnson, second only to Travis Kelce in touchdown receptions last year. Juwan has 1 this year. I don't know how many times Juwan has been targeted in the end zone, but I just know he has 1 touchdown reception. Alvin Kamara, a touchdown machine through the first 4 or 5 years of his career. I think he only had, I might be mistaken, I think Kamara has a total of 3 touchdowns this year. All that isn't Derek Carr's fault either. I'm not absolving Derek of any blame whatsoever. Frankly, I say heap it on. Number 4 deserves a lion's share of the criticism. But don't forget to spread your blame butter around either. Derek Carr did not lose this game single-handedly, and he is certainly not the sole reason that a bad New Orleans Saints team is 5-6 right now.
And finally, I'll give my 2 cents on this too, just because this came up in the comments right here saying, let's see if I can get it up real quick. There we go. I would be highly disappointed in the front office if they bring the coaching staff back next year. I want to play a hypothetical game and then get off. Is if this team were to make the playoffs, would you still fire the coaching staff?
Wow. First of all, regardless of what I think, they won't fire the coaching staff if they sneak into the play. They just flat out won't. I think no matter what happens now, unless this team becomes the reincarnation of the 2009 or 2011 Saints over the last 6 games, I clean house of the offensive staff. Zero question in my mind. I probably get rid of a lot of the defensive coaches too. Because this defense has been trashed now for 6 consecutive games. So I mean, having said that, if I'm basically stripping Dennis Allen of his entire staff, I think I might make a move with Dennis Allen too. But I'll tell you, if I make the playoffs, I only do so. Make a move with Allen. That is, if I feel 100% confident that I can get my guy, be it an assistant for another team, a college head, whoever it is. Yeah, I'm not ready to play those hypothetical name games yet. I think I make that move, assuming this team goes out on a first-round exit, and probably, as you said earlier, probably in embarrassing fashion. In my head, that doesn't change anything. In the Saints' head, I'm afraid it will.
Very rarely does a team make the playoffs and the head coach get fired. The biggest one that comes to mind is the 14-2 Chargers, right?
Yeah.
Marty Schottenheimer was probably the big one that comes to mind, but other than that, I can't think of one like of recent memory off the top of my head. We've said it all along. This team's not going to do anything mid-season, and if they make the playoffs, they're going to, for whatever reason, say, you know what, we made the playoffs, we have hope, we're going to keep going forward with the guys that we got. And it's pretty pathetic. Now, if this team ends up, peeing the bed down the stretch, for lack of a better term, we could be having a different conversation. Do I think the staff needs to go? Yeah, I'm kind of at the point where I think the whole staff needs to go. And you need to kind of start over from zero. But I know this front office well enough from over the years, and I think Bob does as well, If they make the playoffs, nothing's going to happen.
Nope.
And you're going to get stuck in the cycle of being a bad football team, being mediocre, being whatever term you guys want to throw out there. But to sum up today, really embarrassing performance, pathetic offensive showing in the red zone. The defense was gifted 2 takeaways, and the offense couldn't do anything with it. Defense couldn't, at this point, let's just play the Jim Morris speech, like couldn't do diddly poo, right? Couldn't do anything. And that's how this team felt today. And you kind of knew the result. For me, at least, I kind of knew the result at halftime, even with the Tyrann Mathieu pick at the end of the first half. I kind of knew how this was going to go. So with that, Bob, as you write what should be some really positive articles all week, where can people follow you and all of your work?
Folks, thanks for, and I only saw a couple of the comments. I don't see the comments like Brendan does, but thank you for those of you who have chimed in. Thank you for joining us on the Bayou Blitz post game show. For better or for worse, I guess we'll go down with this Titanic of a team, and you can follow my work this week, and as long as I keep my mouth clean on these live telecasts, hopefully for the foreseeable future, you can follow me on Facebook. Bob Rose, ROSE, at Bobby R 2613 on Twitter, and my work, as well as Kyle Mosley, John Hendricks, and Ross Jackson through the Saints News Network at Saints News on Twitter. And make sure you continue to strengthen our Bayou Blitz Facebook page and our Bayou Blitz Twitter page as well. Thank you all for already. If you've already joined, make sure you pull your friends and family members in. Use it as a sounding board. Just be kind, courteous to each other. But other than that, sound off. Let your frustrations go.
That was the key there. Say whatever you want, but be kind and courteous to other people. Everybody's going to have different opinions, and that's what we're here for. That's the beauty of sports. Just be respectful to each other. Be kind, right? That's the most important thing. As much as Bob and I love doing this because we'll shoot, it's our jobs. And hanging out with you guys, at the end of the day, it's football, guys. We don't have to sit there and be absolute animals to each other over it. For myself, you can follow me on virtually everything at BT Boylan. Hopefully you guys have a good rest of the Sunday. Bob and I will be back on Wednesday night to break down more New Orleans Saints against another team that has a lot of New Orleans ties. This Atlanta Falcons team did. We get even more with the Detroit Lions next week. So until then, hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. Follow us with the Bayou Blitz. We'll see you guys on Wednesday night. Who dat?